So this video is talking about swords as a source of electrical energy. The author is UAP channel and the video is The Last Electric Night. So this part of the video is only about the physical explanation, the technical explanation of the swords as possibly electrical devices.
Description below. So here, in these swords, you have a couple of elements that you see over and over again. And so you have the knobby ends, just like you do on the cannons. And then you have some perforations. You have some welding of metal conductors, really like wires. But there are also these hand grip cords wrapped around the handle of the sword. And that usually is metallic. Even if it's fabric, it has a metallic weave in it. So it is a coil, so it is somewhat electrical or electromagnetic in nature. At least it would respond to electromagnetic frequencies the way any coil would, as far as receiving, producing these fields, electrical fields. And there is an interesting gap between these metal extensions that provide an anode and cathode, much like a welder's tip, or like a spark plug, or any number of examples. Yes, obviously, the conventional wisdom, it is true that if you're in a sword fight, hand-to-hand combat, that protective disc or ring or whatever shape it takes is there for obvious reasons to protect your hand. But the decoration, the ornamentation, sometimes we assume that it is merely decorative or merely ornamental, but perhaps there is a function, like with these holes on either side of the shaft of the blade, that could be for any number of things, including a protrusion of wire. Same thing with the knobs on the ends. It's a nice place to wrap some conductive wire around if they did that. And the point that we are making is that perhaps they were like a lightsaber. And I will show you some pictures that would support that, or rather not pictures, but drawings of demonstrations. The expos of their day show lightning coming from these swords. And look at the copper. It looks like copper. Some could be brass, the inlay. Very interesting that they would do it that way. And I see the golden ratio in the geometric shapes on many of these weapons. The materials of brass and the iron, the nickel, it's all conductive. And oftentimes there are holes for some kind of a wire to go through, and always the grip is wrapped with a metallic fiber weave. Now look at this suit of armor. There are a number of things to mention about it, but this sword, my goodness. Yes, it's supposedly it's a two-handed sword that is a sword specifically for battling against mounted riders. That's what we're told. But there are a lot of things about different swords that suggest maybe there's more to the story. And the serrations, these shapes, these extensions, the knobs, some of the elements are nice, decorative, yes, ornamental, yes, but maybe there's more to it. There are more functional, practical reasons for it, and especially the size. I mean, look at that size. I mean, folks, the handle grips look like they're made for two hands, but what size of hands? Really big hands. I mean, there's plenty of room for two hands. I understand the leverage aspect of it and having the knob at the end so your hand doesn't slip off the end. But stick with me. Now, the thing I noticed about this is it's not sharp. And I've seen this a lot. I've been disappointed. I was into swords and suits of armor when I was a kid. So it's quite a long time ago. I mean, I don't remember everything I learned at that time. It's probably a lot of bollocks anyway, but I do remember being disappointed when I would look at what was supposedly a real set of armor or a real sword. When I got over to Europe the first time and got to one of these older castles and looked at it, I was sorely disappointed. Now, I was very much impressed by the building. I was impressed by the size of the swords and that type of stuff. The suits of armor weren't very impressive. They seemed chintzy and thin and light to me, although I didn't get to handle them much at all, or if at all. The swords were kind of heavy and they were dull, very dull. But I've seen in other videos, and I don't necessarily want to show it because of copyright, but where they tested these suits of armor, and the conventional wisdom is, yeah, it protects you much better against all kinds of weapons, especially like arrows. But the fact of the matter is, a longbowman, when he shot at a recreation of a suit of armor, from almost any distance, he totally penetrated any part of the armor with any of his arrow heads. And yes, I mean, at point blank, sure, he has an advantage, but still, I thought, that would deflect off. But the thing is, I'm thinking of steel. These things weren't made of steel. They didn't have steel, apparently. It's a softer metal, and it penetrates. So if you start taking a look at electrical fields, and you can do these overlay ultraviolet images, or it could be infrared, but polarized. You can see these electrical fields coming off in nodes and different array patterns based on the geometry of the metal. And so you can see what we're talking about here with these plasma discharges and different ideas that we have for that. And it even may be evident in some of the heretofore thought of as decorative wear. So the various shapes that we get, obviously it could be just to save material and weight for better handling. But what if it was more than that? If you look at the grip, it's always metal around the grip, always room for wires. The knob on the end, maybe it's a wear point. Maybe it is. But the sword itself, a lot of these swords, they don't seem very practical. Like, you could poke somebody with this, sure. But it's not really a slashing sword. Like fencing, those swords are kind of lame compared to other ones. And then you get things like this that just seem very strange. Very, very strange. Like, what's going on? But imagine that electrified, all the little electrical fields coming off, the little arcs. So maybe we've never seen these things in action. These little numbers seem very odd. What would you do with that?
So the idea is that the swords were using plasma, were emitting plasma to zap the adversary, which is equivalent with the zap gun that the police are using now. And the metallic clothes that people use were some Faraday cage that they were using to protect themselves against the plasma emitted by these swords. So this was the video.